Picture this. A single vessel, armed with nothing more than steel and human will, manned by sailors who had never felt the sting of combat, wielding the power to shape the destiny of an entire invasion. A method of firing so exact, so brutally effective, that it could alter the outcome of the largest amphibious assault in the history of mankind. On June 6, 1944, as thousands of young Americans waded through the blood-tinted surf of Omaha Beach, an extraordinary event was unfolding just offshore. While the world remembers D-Day for the valor of the infantry and the audacity of the paratroopers, another narrative was quietly taking shape, one where calculation met courage and precision met determination. Today, we explore the story of American gunners aboard destroyers who created a firing pattern so lethal that German commanders could scarcely comprehend what was systematically destroying their so-called invulnerable positions. This story is not merely about a weapon or a tactical maneuver. It is about a moment when innovation, born from urgency and honed through bravery, confronted an enemy with something it had never experienced before. This technique bore no formal title in official manuals. The sailors who mastered it referred to it simply as the pattern, yet its effects in the waters off Normandy would resonate through naval warfare for generations. This is the story of ordinary sailors transformed into extraordinary warriors, and of a firing pattern elevated to legendary status. The year was 1944, and the United States Navy faced a challenge unlike any it had ever encountered. Operation Overlord, the assault on Nazi-occupied France, demanded an unprecedented feat, providing precise, close-range fire support for troops storming fortified beaches, while simultaneously neutralizing German armor ready to counterattack at a moment's notice. Destroyers like the USS Frankfurt, USS Harding, and USS Satali were tasked with roles they had never been built to fulfill. They had to function as mobile artillery batteries capable of surgical precision, navigating shallow, mine-laden waters under constant threat. The crews aboard these ships were young, averaging just 23 years old. Most had never fired their weapons in anger before that fateful day in June. Their commanding officers were primarily reserve officers, men who had been civilians mere years earlier. Teachers, engineers, and shopkeepers who had studied naval combat through textbooks and rigorous exercises along the American coastline. Yet upon their shoulders rested a responsibility that would decide whether thousands of American soldiers would live or die on the beaches of Normandy. What makes this tale remarkable is what these men achieved in the months leading up to D-Day. Call it ingenuity, call it desperation. They began experimenting with firing patterns that defied standard naval doctrine. They realized that by coordinating their 5-inch guns in precise sequences, factoring in the ship's roll and the trajectory of each shell in ways no manual described, they could create a sweeping curtain of steel that moved across the battlefield with deadly elegance. The German defenses were beyond formidable, reinforced concrete bunkers built to survive direct hits, intricate trench networks, machine gun nests covering every approach, and most menacing of all, Panzer divisions positioned just inland, ready to smash the landing forces back into the sea. The Atlantic Wall was Hitler's fortress, and it had never been breached. The creation of what became known as the pattern did not begin with grand strategy or orders from high command. It began with a question that haunted destroyer captains nightly. How do you strike a moving target from a moving platform in turbulent seas, with enough accuracy to avoid hitting your own men only a few hundred yards away? Lieutenant Commander James Holley III, aboard the USS Frankfurt, refused to accept the limitations of the training manual. The son of a Navy admiral, Holley had personal ambition, but more critically, he possessed the vision to see that naval gunfire support could transcend mere bombardment. During exercises off the English coast in April and May 1944, he worked with his gun crews to develop synchronized firing patterns capable of sweeping shells across enemy positions with remarkable consistency. One insight came from an unexpected source: Robert Henderson, a gunner's mate from Oklahoma who had spent years in his father's machine shop. Henderson understood rhythm, timing, and mechanical precision, all qualities that translated perfectly to naval gunnery. He suggested that if the crews fired not simply on command, but in a carefully orchestrated sequence that accounted for the ship's movement, they could create overlapping kill zones, impervious to enemy survival. Other destroyer crews were independently developing similar methods. On the USS McCook, Lieutenant Ralph Remy trained his crews in ripple fire, a continuous sequence producing a rolling barrage. On the USS Thompson, crews experimented with zone shooting, dividing enemy positions into grids and saturating each systematically. Yet resistance remained. Traditional doctrine emphasized broadside volleys, every gun firing together for maximum intimidation and the occasional lucky hit. What these young officers proposed seemed almost heretical: precision over brute force, mathematics over raw power. Some senior officers dismissed it as theoretical exercises doomed to fail under the chaos of real combat. But the destroyer crews persevered, motivated by a chilling awareness. On D-Day, their accuracy would determine whether soldiers survived or died. They drilled tirelessly, firing until barrels glowed, practicing in darkness, in stormy seas, utterly exhausted. Their ships became floating laboratories of lethality. At the core of the pattern lay a revolutionary concept in naval warfare. Naval guns could provide the equivalent of close air support, except from the sea. This required thinking like fighter pilots, rather than battleship commanders, seeing the battlefield as a dynamic three-dimensional space where timing mattered as much as accuracy. The objective was not merely to destroy fortifications, but to suppress them long enough for infantry to advance safely. The method's elegance was in its simplicity. By staggering shots from multiple guns, accounting for flight time, and synchronizing with the vessel's roll, crews ensured that explosions cascaded continuously across enemy positions. German defenders had no opportunity to regroup, to remount weapons, or to call for reinforcements. This approach defied centuries of naval doctrine, which prioritized bigger guns, thicker armor, and overwhelming volleys. The destroyer crews proposed that precision and timing could be deadlier than sheer firepower. A properly placed 5-inch shell could outperform a 16-inch battleship shell that arrived too late or missed entirely. The pattern reflected a quintessentially American mindset, that problems could be solved through innovation rather than blind adherence to tradition, that lieutenants and sergeants might envision tactics that admirals had never considered. It was democracy applied to warfare. Good ideas could come from anywhere, and practical experience often trumped rank. Yet there was a darker side. These men were calculating how to kill with unprecedented efficiency. Shells per minute, tons of explosives to ensure no survivors, transforming themselves from sailors into precise instruments of destruction. When the pre-dawn darkness of June 6, 1944 finally fell, the destroyer crews executed the pattern under the most punishing conditions imaginable. The USS Frankfurt, USS Harding, and USS Satterley positioned themselves less than 1,000 yards from Omaha Beach, close enough to identify individual German soldiers through their sights, close enough that a single mine or torpedo could send them to the bottom within minutes. The pattern they unleashed was symphonic in complexity. Each destroyer's 5-inch guns fired sequentially, not simultaneously. Gun 1 fired, 3 seconds later Gun 2, then Gun 3, producing a rippling cascade of explosions that advanced across German lines like a moving wall of death. As the ships moved forward, gunners continuously adjusted aim, keeping the barrage precisely ahead of the advancing American infantry. The impact on German defenses was immediate and devastating. A Panzer IV emerging from cover to target landing craft would be bracketed by one shell, pummeled by the second and obliterated by the third, all within a span of 10 seconds. Concrete bunkers, long considered impervious to prior bombardments, were struck not once, but repeatedly at the same points as gunners walked their fire with terrifying precision into the narrow firing slits. Machine gun nests were eradicated before their crews could even pivot toward the advancing beaches. German officers later interviewed described the experience as unlike anything they had faced on the Eastern Front or in North Africa. One commander of the 352nd Infantry Division admitted that the American naval gunfire's precision made movement impossible, his troops pinned in place, unable to coordinate a coherent response. Another officer recounted watching an entire company of 12 Panzer tanks annihilated in under 2 minutes by destroyers that seemed to anticipate exactly where each tank would emerge from cover. The pattern solved a dilemma that had haunted amphibious assaults since Gallipoli: how to provide continuous, pinpoint fire support at the most vulnerable moment, when soldiers were neither in boats nor fully established on shore. By converting their destroyers into agile, responsive artillery platforms, the American crews forged a protective curtain of steel that moved in tandem with the infantry's advance. Yet the significance went beyond mere tactics. The destroyers demonstrated a fundamental evolution in warfare. The era of the largest guns dominating the battlefield was giving way to the supremacy of precision, coordination, and technological mastery. These sailors proved that a well-trained crew on a small ship could achieve what entire squadrons of heavy cruisers might fail to accomplish through conventional bombardment. But their accomplishment also raises difficult questions. Was this innovation, or merely a more efficient mechanism of killing? Did mathematical precision sanitize the horror of violence, or did it only serve to mask the brutal reality? Young men using calculations to maximize destruction. Consider the German soldiers caught in the onslaught, teenage conscripts from occupied territories, ardent veterans of the Eastern Front, all cut down by shells fired from ships they could neither see nor counter, participants in a battle plan they could scarcely comprehend. The efficiency of the pattern meant they often perished without ever spotting their adversary. Victims of a meticulously orchestrated storm of fire. Was there honor in such asymmetric warfare, or was it simply the industrialization of death, stripped of the traditional face-to-face confrontation of soldiers? The crews themselves wrestled with this reality. Robert Henderson, the gunner's mate whose ingenuity helped shape the pattern, recorded in his diary that he felt like an executioner armed with a mathematics degree. The mental detachment required to calculate firing solutions, to reduce human beings to coordinates on a grid, left a psychological imprint. In the 1950s, several crew members from the USS Frankfurt sought psychiatric care for symptoms, now recognized as PTSD, stemming from the very precision that had made them so deadly. Contrast this with earlier codes of war, the samurai, who demanded eye-to-eye confrontation, or medieval knights, bound by chivalry to meet their foes on equal terms. The pattern marked a radical departure, a shift to a colder, more calculating model of combat. War as engineering problem, battle as applied mathematics. Yet, from another perspective, the pattern saved lives. Survivors of Omaha Beach consistently credited the destroyer fire with neutralizing German positions that would have slaughtered them. Each destroyed machine gun nest meant dozens of American soldiers survived to reach the beach. Every Panzer destroyed secured the lives of entire platoons advancing inland. This raises profound moral considerations. Is it more ethical to develop methods that kill efficiently but shorten wars, or to rely on less effective tactics that prolong conflict? The destroyer crews shortened the Battle of Normandy, potentially saving thousands, but did so by perfecting the art of lethal precision. Their work also exemplified a distinctly American approach to war, leveraging industrial and technological solutions to military problems, treating combat as a system to optimize and improve. This approach would become a hallmark of U.S. strategy, fighting from a distance with overwhelming technical superiority, often against adversaries incapable of responding in kind. On the morning of June 7th, 1944, the sun rose over a Normandy beach littered with the wreckage of battle, but firmly in Allied hands. The destroyers that had delivered the pattern withdrew to deeper water, their gun barrels scorched, crews exhausted, yet triumphant. In the days that followed, as D-Day's success became undeniable, military analysts began to study what these crews had achieved. The pattern, initially dismissed as theoretical, quickly became the standard for naval gunfire support. Within months, destroyer crews across the Atlantic and Pacific theaters drilled and refined it, adapting it to new situations. Its legacy stretches far beyond World War II. The principle, using training and technology to deliver precise effects rather than relying solely on brute force, became the foundation of modern combined arms warfare. Today's close air support, the seamless coordination between aircraft and ground units, echoes the conceptual framework pioneered by those destroyer crews. Continuous, accurate, responsive fire moving with advancing forces. Those who developed and executed the pattern rarely spoke of it. Henderson returned to Oklahoma to run his father's machine shop. Olai became a 4-star admiral and chief of naval operations, yet never publicly claimed credit for the tactics conceived aboard the Frankfurt. Many gunners simply returned home, carrying the memories of what they had done in silence, yet their achievement remains extraordinary. On the most decisive day of the 20th century, ordinary Americans, once civilians, demonstrated the profound human capacity for innovation under pressure. They proved that when lives are at stake, creativity becomes a moral imperative. Finding better solutions isn't just about winning, it's about bringing more people home alive. The pattern received no official name. It never appeared in wartime manuals. No one earned a medal specifically for its development. Yet it saved countless lives on D-Day and in every subsequent amphibious operation. It embodies a universal truth. The most critical innovations often emerge not from laboratories or high command, but from ordinary people confronting extraordinary challenges and refusing to accept the old ways as the only path forward. Today, walking the beaches of Normandy, one can still see the bunkers German forces deemed impregnable. One can tread the sands where thousands of Americans sacrificed everything for victory. And looking out to sea, one can imagine the destroyers. Closer to shore than any capital ship should have dared, their guns delivering that now legendary rippling pattern. Feared by German veterans for decades, it was just a firing pattern until it became the difference between victory and catastrophic defeat. Between families receiving telegrams of condolence or the embrace of returning sons. It was just mathematics, until it became the story of Americans refusing to accept that the only path forward demanded unimaginable casualties. The heroes of this story aren't solely those who stormed the beaches, though their bravery was boundless. They are the officers who rethought the problem, the gunners who drilled until instinct dictated timing, the captains who risked their ships in shallow water to protect advancing soldiers. This is the legacy of the pattern. A reminder that heroism takes many forms, that sometimes courage is found in meticulous preparation. American ingenuity has always been a secret weapon. The men who think differently, challenge convention and innovate are as essential to victory as those who charge headlong into battle. They were just destroyer sailors. It was just a firing pattern. But on June 6, 1944, it was everything.